Rockport Marine how good the CCA people were at following instructions. Don't let me down. I'm the Post Captain for the CCA, the Cruising Club of America.
Well, welcome. I'm Sam Temple. I'm the president of Rockport Marine, and thanks for all of you being here today. So I grew up working at this boatyard and went away to college. Came back. Let's see. Well, I worked at Brooklyn Boatyard for about 5 years in my 20s. Built some boats in a sheep barn at one point. Came back here in 2007, and I started taking leadership of projects in 2009. Led my first new build, which was the Ted Fontaine design 50-foot fluke Arabesque, launched in 2014. Subsequently, I took over the role of president of the company in 2019, and have been going pretty steady ever since. I took over the yard from my stepfather, Taylor Allen, whose father started a boatyard and a restaurant in 1962. So when you go up to the design office, that was the sail-off restaurant, and our break room was the kitchens. So his father was maitre d' of a restaurant in the evenings and a mechanic in the day. We have a pretty terrific crew here. We're about 54 full-time crew across all disciplines. We try to do everything in-house. We subcontract a little bit when we're short, but we really try to handle it all. With steady subcontractors, we're a bit over 60 right now. Our facilities include, this main shop, which has, quite a lot of capacities. You'll see an 85-ton travel lift, a dock system that's, really not a marina, but geared towards servicing the boats, and, that we care for. We've got 3 off-site locations with 8 buildings, including some paint bays that we cycle boats through. This is an example of, I really feel like we can build about anything. This was a project, pretty outside of the realm of the boat works that we usually do. This Thomas Mosier had a contract to do all the furniture in a teaching hospital at UPenn. It was Norman Foster was the architect. They subbed the work to us. I didn't have any idea how we were going to do it, but I knew we could. So that all went down to UPenn in pieces and was reassembled, down there. And it's nice that once in a while I get a note about somebody who had a good feeling from arriving at this concierge desk at a hospital, which is meant to feel very warm and inviting. We have 3 primary aspects to our business. So the service fleet is about 75 boats. That's most of what the off-site buildings are about, and they're mostly cruising boats from the middle of the last century, mostly sailboats, mostly plank on frame, but our specialty has really been these traditional boats. We store 13 Concordia yawls. That has been a real specialty. In the middle bay that you walked right by, but the boat's under plastic, is a Concordia yawl. It was moved in yesterday. A different one was moved out yesterday. So, we're often cycling through work on those boats. Also, the yachts of Augie Nielsen. This is Cephedra. That's been a wonderful relationship for us. That boat has been over and cruised in the Baltic, a few years ago. But does a nice programs around the Novgorod Bay. Probably store 10 Augie Nielsen boats, and this yard and Wallsted's in Denmark are the 2 that have been granted permission to build to his designs. Something we haven't done, but something that we like this that we are able to do. When Augie Nielsen died, he had in his will that he didn't think anybody could, carry off his designs as well as he intended, and he didn't want them built. About 20 years ago, we convinced the daughters of Augie Nielsen that we could do it. And yes, someday I hope we have the opportunity. Restoration, I think for a while we were really known for our restoration among, the niche group of people that pay attention to things like our work. So this is the interior trade wind, which was a big project for us in around, I think it launched around 2012. That was an Alden motor sailor that had really a complete, rebuild here. We saved some planking, I believe.
The work here, was across a lot of disciplines. This was a 48-foot Phil Rhodes boat that had really lost its shape. So we laser scanned the boat, lofted new lines, or lofted a set of lines from the existing topside, which were pretty close to the as-designed bottom, and laminated new frames, and scarfed a new set of frames back into the existing topsides planks. That was a great project. Adventurous, has been a real favorite of this yard. Again, another huge refit launched in 2013. Just was back this last summer for the completion of a 10-year Lloyd's recertification, and is now back in Antigua. I was on the phone with the owner yesterday. He continues to really enjoy the boat, although his time with it is probably coming towards an end. I think he's ready to let it go. But that's been a great one for us. That's the main salon of Adventurous. Also, occasionally we get to work on a commercial boat. This was the fishing vessel Loriot out of Hull, Massachusetts. A guy my age, commercial lobster fisherman. He needed some bottom work, he needed some deck work, he needed some systems work. He'd heard about us, I don't know where. He came up. He came up twice. One time he came in the shed. I don't know how much you can tell there, but that is a big lobster boat. That we had to take all the gear off the top to get it in these 20-foot doors. And so it's really satisfying, that we can serve the commercial fleet, and that our work is not just applicable to yachts, but can be tuned towards a working boat. This is Bernice George Owen, I believe. Chamberlain, tell me if I'm wrong about that. P-boat. And this is the photo you get when Ben Mendelwitz says none of you guys are dressed okay. Go down below and steer with the autopilot for a minute. So it's good. We were delivering the boat shortly thereafter, and we sent them this photo and said, "Your boat's on its way. Let us know when it gets there." This was the 6-meter Jill. That one. I believe we saved the lead keel. That was really a thorough rebuild. Yeah. Latifa, another Fife that they were on their way to the Pacific at the beginning of COVID, and stopped because of the news. Called up and said, "Hey, I think I saw last time I was at your shop. There's some space in the back. Can we get in for a pile of work?" And so we did that. And Bolero, which was a great project. That was one of the early ones that I was involved in when I came back to the yard. That was a terrific project, carried off by John England, who was here for 22 years, and on a tight time frame, and great thing to work on. New construction, tends to be the cold molded side of things. It has been vastly sailboats for us. A little bit of powerboats, and we've got some powerboats coming up. Oftentimes I'll get someone who calls and says, I'm open. I want a wooden boat. I'm open to, your input on construction method, and I have a conversation with them about where they're going to go with the boat, how they're going to use it, and I've basically always ended up talking them into a cold molded boat, not because that's, my favorite style of doing things, but once someone tells me, we might bring it to Florida, we might want to leave it there for a while, we're there's so few people that in yards in the world that can take care of traditional boats that I usually end up, going cold molded when we build new boats. This is a 45-foot Bill Tripp design that we did, I think launched in 22. This was a really interesting project for me. I was on the phone with Bill Tripp. He said, I've got a guy who wants to build a boat. He doesn't want a wooden boat. He's had bad experiences. I don't know what should I tell him? And I said, well, it's not really a wooden boat. It's a wood composite boat. Bill, it's got a foam core. It's got a bunch of carbon in it. It's sheathed on the outside with fiberglass. It's an apt term. Not all the strength comes from wood on this boat. It comes from the composites also. And it worked. Wonderful client. It was the entrance for me and this yard into working with a professional project management company who's the same people who ended up bringing me the 95-foot boat we're currently building. So very systems intensive, high performance vessel. Matt was part of the delivery crew. This is Carrie Alley. This is a smaller Ted Fontaine boat we built, a 36-footer. Very shallow draft, twin rudders to carry off the draft. This was before I came back. I was thinking about it, I believe the most recent Carvel plank boat we've built. This was a double planked David Ryder Turner design, built for a Maine client. Nice little project. Actually, it's this month's wooden boat calendar photo is this boat under construction. This, by weight, this is the largest boat we've ever built. The Spirit of Bermuda, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, was a terrific project for this yard. It's very satisfying to know that the school programs, are getting use of the boat that we built. They come back occasionally and have done big pieces of service work, refit work. They've always got a tight time frame. It's always a little challenging, but great to know that's out there. Not all cold molded boats. There was a period in the early 2000s where there were a series of, there was Lynx, there was Adventure, Godspeed, which is here, and there was one more. So a series of these replica boats, which the crew really enjoyed. It's very romantic boat building, but it's a real limited. I think that work is really limited in its depth. There's not many people that want. There's not many museums that need something like that. So I haven't. I'd be surprised to do more of this work. I'd be pleased, but. Mystic Seaport does do a bunch of this work, which is fine too. In 23, we were fortunate to launch two boats designed and built in-house. The R37 was a Maine lobster boat for someone who had experience with other open transom boats, wanted that sort of mobile beach aspect of anywhere you go, you've got a lee-side beach with an open transom. That was a great project for us. It developed into quite a systems-intensive boat, packed with everything. But yeah, and actually is now has been sold and is in Italy. So interested to see if we get inquiries on Maine lobster boats from over there. And this was the second of Sam Chamberlain's designs. Again, the shallow draft boat for Guilford, Connecticut. The guy, the name comes from him saying to me, let's put a little wolf in the sheep here. So he upped the performance of things a bit, but still, he really needs a shower. We've been to where he keeps this boat. It's, you can see the lines on his chart plotter where he's bumped rocks and bumped mud mostly. But great boat, little shallow fin keel and a centerboard. So our current project's a little preview of the tours that we're about to embark on here. Project Ouzel, again, came to us through MCM Newport, this management company. The clients knew they wanted a Maine boat. I suggested Lang & Design. I believe they had already had, were oriented there. And this has been a fantastic, project. We're in week 121 of the build. We've got 40 to go. So it's about a 3-year project. It's been new for me to not be on a 1-year timeline or a 1.5-year timeline. It's nice to be able to iterate within the process, meaning we've got 4 vanities to build. We can learn from number 1. They get more efficient as we go. The systems are we've done most of it before, but it's all in one very very high-end package in a way that I haven't done. So it's been a terrific project. This is Billy's photo of, we built the deck as a separate part. I believe this was the rollover photo. It may not have the deck photo. The deck was built as a separate part. It was built in this bay. The doors on this bay are 2.5 feet narrower than the deck was. So we had to cut a big hole in the building to get the deck out and hoist it on, which was a lot of fun. Yeah, there we go. That's the deck being put on the hull. So you'll see on board, but so you have a sense of where we're headed. This is Mark Whiteley. He's an interior architect from the UK. This is his interior architecture that we'll be installing. A lot of the varnished work has been built but is not installed and is off-site now. So a lot of what you'll see is painted white interior, and in some areas there's not a lot of interior. And then you'll take a tour of Brilliant. This is Brilliant. It looks like completing the Camden to Brooklyn section of the race, if I had to guess, and chasing down a Brooklyn boatyard built Agamogan 47. The folks from Mystic, Chris and Shannon and Glenn, who's running that project, will tell you, more about that. But the Seaport had been, they've been looking after this boat for a very long time, and watching some mild structural issues, and working with the Coast Guard until they pulled the trigger on some work, structural bottom work and a drive line. So that's the chain drive system that Brilliant has, which is very interesting to us. It's an input shaft at a 20-inch or so difference from the output shaft, located way forward in the boat, and a very long drive shaft leading aft. Another view of it, really that was an addendum to some planking work and some frames and floor timbers. What initiated this was a bit of electrolysis coming from the bronze diagonal strapping to the wooden members of the boat. I meant to have a slide in there about what's going on in the design office. So that's the other section of tour that we'll do. On the drawing board there, we've got a 35-foot shallow draft boat for a repeat client, shallow draft power boat. Probably it's going to be twin outboards, again, because of the draft and the idea that they'll probably take out the drivetrain at some point. And then there's a 48-foot version of the Rockport 37, of the 37-foot lobster boat, someone called and said, would you do a really big one of these? So we're drawing one of those. We're also, the design office is doing a lot of work right now in service of Brilliant and in service of Ouzel. So, you know, a lot of horsepower going into construction drawings. So what we get from Lang and what we get from Mark Whiteley are not buildable drawings. They're indicative drawings. They're great work, but they rely heavily on this yard to do the construction plans and in some cases the engineering of what we're doing. So it's, you know, it all, I think, I don't want to sort of just promote here. You know, there's you know, challenges to this work. It's not, you know, it's not always easy running a boatyard. We had the fire alarm going off all day on Thursday this week. You know, there's plenty of challenges. Last winter we had water in this shop for the first, second, and third times, you know, in 40 years, you know, since the shop has been built. You know, the sea level is a real issue for us, and I'm, you know, looking at how we're going to tackle that, you know, on our little postage stamp of waterfront, and you know what we can do, you know, to keep this shop going. You know, we're better off than some. We did not lose dock infrastructure or anything in the storms. We're used to, you know, heavy southerly storms, so everything's built, you know, heavily. But it's an issue. You know, fortunately, it's not, we're not carpeted. We can sort of clean up pretty easily after those events, but it's an issue. We also live in a town that's got, you know, it's beautiful. It's got good health care. It's got great schools. Things are getting really expensive. You know, my crew lives, you know, further out than I'd like, and you know, it's going to be difficult to keep the crew that I need, you know, living within commuting distance. I'm working with people that I, you know, who were here when I started working here, and you know, at age 11 or something. Those guys are great, going strong, and we're really trying to bring on crew and transfer skill set, which is going well, you know. But people, you know, a boat school grad is different, is a different employee than someone who grew up, you know, working in their father's shop or on their dad's farm, or et cetera. You know, it's, you know, getting those people spooled up is, you know, a challenge. And you know, choosing our focus, you know, as we've been really busy with work for the last couple of years, you know, talking to the crew about, hey, you know, are you okay building a wood composite boat? You know, are we okay building a 3-year project? You know, there's a lot of people get into this because they're interested in stuff like Brilliant. You know, and fortunately we've been able to navigate that. You know, to some extent we need to take what work is available. To some extent we need to honor the wishes of our crew and keep people engaged. So yeah, that's where we are. And I think we're ready to move into the tour section here.